Over the past 2 decades, China's rapid growth has made it the world's second-largest economy. However, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, Beijing's focus is now shifting from merely pursuing growth figures to building long-term strategic victories based on technological strength, domestic resilience, and international influence. Xi Jinping has described China's new era as an era that will redefine human history, signaling a major shift in how the country views its role on the global stage. However, this vision has also raised concerns among Western countries. Analysts warn that if the China model becomes the norm, the world may witness prosperity that comes together with strict surveillance and political control. But is this claim true? So in this video, we will look at how China plans to win, not on the battlefield, but in the arena of the global economy. Stay tuned. After more than 4 decades as a global leader in manufacturing and trade, China is now rewriting the direction of its economy. The country, once known as the world's factory, is now striving to become a more self-reliant economic power, no longer fully dependent on exports and foreign investment, but built on internal strength, technology, and an increasingly mature domestic market. This shift began when President Xi Jinping's leadership introduced a policy called dual circulation in 2020, when trade tensions with the United States reached their peak. This strategy aims to build a two-way economic system that supports itself, namely an internal flow and another external flow. The internal flow, or internal circulation, emphasizes strengthening the domestic market through innovation, domestic demand, and local technology. Meanwhile, the external flow, or external circulation, maintains trade and investment relations with the outside world selectively to ensure that China remains relevant in an increasingly fragmented global economy. According to analysis from Bruegel, this move represents a strategic calculation to adapt to an era of increasingly uncertain global markets. It allows China to reduce its dependence on exports and, in turn, build economic resilience against global shocks such as pandemics or trade restrictions. A study by the East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore, describes this approach as a long-term structural shift in which China moves from a low-cost economic model to one based on high productivity and technological innovation. In simple terms, Beijing wants to ensure that future growth is no longer determined by cheap labor, but by technological sophistication and the strength of its domestic market. As a complement to this policy, Xi also introduced a large-scale campaign known as Common Prosperity, an effort to reduce the wealth gap between urban and rural areas, and to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared more evenly. Through this initiative, the government expands access to education, healthcare, and job opportunities in less developed areas. Its aim is to create a stronger middle class, thereby increasing purchasing power and making domestic consumers the main engine of new growth. These measures show a new awareness in China that future success cannot depend on the old model. For several decades, China's rapid growth was driven by massive exports and investment in real estate. However, dependence on these factors also made the Chinese economy vulnerable to external risks. Now, as global demand becomes increasingly uncertain, Beijing wants to ensure that its domestic market is large and strong enough to sustain long-term growth. This strategy does not mean that China is closing itself off from the outside world. On the contrary, Beijing is strengthening its global network through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a cross-continental economic network linking Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America. The BRI now functions as a complement to the dual circulation strategy by providing channels for investment, infrastructure, and trade that support both domestic and international growth simultaneously. Through the combination of these two strategies, China is trying to build an economic ecosystem capable of moving in two directions, from inside outward and from outside inward, without becoming overly dependent on any major economic power. According to the World Bank, this approach has helped China maintain economic stability, even as the world faces geopolitical tensions and disruptions in global supply chains. The China Economic Update Report for 2024 states that this model has had a positive impact not only on China's economy, but also on developing countries receiving investment under BRI projects, particularly in Southeast Asia and Africa. China's investment in infrastructure and new energy in the region has also accelerated the development of local technology. Recent data also shows that this strategy is beginning to bear fruit. According to China's National Bureau of Statistics, China's economy grew by around 5.2% in the first half of 2025, exceeding market expectations. However, behind these positive figures, structural economic challenges remain significant. The World Bank expects China's growth rate to moderate to around 4.5% by next year, due to factors such as an aging population, high local government debt, as well as reliance on fiscal policy to maintain economic momentum. Behind the encouraging numbers and reports, China knows that the real challenge has only just begun. To remain competitive in the coming decade, China must adapt to global changes that no longer favor the old model. From here begins a new chapter, a phase of economic reform that is far more bold and complex. While many countries are still struggling to adjust to global economic changes, China is stepping into a phase that is more daring and high risk. The country is now facing three main challenges often referred to by analysts as the 3D: debt, deflation, and demography. These three factors are now testing the true resilience of China's economy. However, for President Xi Jinping, these challenges are seen as an opportunity to rebuild the foundations of his country's economy, based on innovation and high technology. Under the 15th Five-Year Plan, Xi introduced a new concept called New Quality Productive Forces, an approach to create growth that is higher in quality, no longer merely fast. This concept marks a shift from earlier strategies such as Made in China 2025, which emphasized upgrading the manufacturing industry toward a broader and more future-oriented strategy. Xi Jinping wants to make innovation the main driving force of the economy, where sectors such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, robotics, aerospace, and new energy become the primary focus of national development. Xi also chose not to repeat the massive stimulus approach used during the 2008 global financial crisis. Instead, he emphasizes a stable but selective strategy, where the government channels financial support only to sectors considered critical for the future, such as green energy, the digital economy, and applied science. This approach is seen as more cautious, yet potentially capable of producing more sustainable growth in the long term. In its implementation, the Chinese government practices a control model often described by local scholars as a bird in a cage, a classic metaphor in China's political economy. In this model, the private sector is encouraged to innovate and grow, but within boundaries set by the central government. The aim is to ensure that technological progress does not drift away from national objectives. In this way, China hopes to maintain a balance between market creativity and political stability. Unlike Western countries that often change direction after elections, China's system allows 5-year policies to be implemented consistently and comprehensively. However, Xi Jinping is aware that this economic victory comes with significant risks. High local government debt, pressure on the yuan, as well as technological competition with the United States continue to be major challenges. But for China, victory does not mean conquering the world. It means being able to define the rules of the global economic game. Because for China, true victory is not about who is the richest or the strongest. It is about the ability to endure, to grow, and to lead the world on its own terms, under an economic banner that it has created itself.